Hi, my name is Asya Hamid, and welcome to the first ever episode of The Black Box.
How do you feel with everything happening? And, how are you in general with not only personally in your own life, but even in retrospect of everything that's happening?
Um, well, obviously, what's been happening recently with like in the wake of George Floyd, his death and the protests that have been going on, it's it's sort of the same narrative that we've seen time and time again. And like I'm only like, we're young people. I'm only like 22 years old, but I feel
Mm,
so tired already of seeing it because we've seen this with Sandra Bland, we've seen this with Trayvon Martin, we've seen in America young black people that are being systematically killed by just a corrupt law enforcement and
mm,
just once again enforcing the status quo, which is this systematic racism against black
mm,
people. And we see the protests, we have the vigils, we have the memorials, we have the Black Lives Matter trending. And after, some companies might do something. Maybe there's a law or something. Obama in his term, he made it so police officers have to now wear body cam footage.
mm,
Um, but after that, I noticed that nothing ever really happens. With George Floyd, what is very, very different is just I think people are all so collectively tired of what has happened. They have lived through this and they are tired and they're not taking it anymore. And so we're seeing these protests, we're seeing the looting, we're seeing the rioting, we're seeing hundreds of videos on Twitter all over the place of police
mm,
officers that are being horribly aggressive to protesters. There are international protests. I know there's like a protest here in Leicester for what has happened.
mm,
And even now, after, at the time recording, after George Floyd's, the four police officers that were involved in his murder
mm,
have been arrested, even though unfortunately three of them have been released. I believe one of them, Derek Chauvin, has been released on bail, which was
mm,
$1 million, which is absurd. We haven't got justice for Breonna Taylor, and we still haven't got justice for Abbott to Sandra Bland.
mhm.
George Zimmerman is still walking around like
Yep,
completely free.
yep,
He was like signing like what he was signing like Skittles or something like Skittle bags because that's what Trayvon Martin was buying at the time of it. Like it's crazy. And so I think even though I'm not in America, I'm not African American, just as a black person, it's so, so important to use whatever platform you have, whatever social media you have, even if you're not
mm,
marching in the streets and tearing down statues and like, like not doing anything physically. It's good to donate. I've donated. It's good to sign petitions. They take minutes. It's good to share about that. It's good to keep
yep,
that conversation going
yeah,
on, whether it's on Instagram, Twitter,
mm,
whatever. Social media, it does have its flaws, but the biggest thing it has right now is civilian journalism, because without
yeah,
social media like Twitter, you would not be able to keep up with these protests or these videos which show police officers doing just awful
mm,
aggressive things to protesters. And it is draining. Honestly, it's really draining, and it's so hurtful to see how much suffering is going on in the world right now. But it's important to try and let that motivate you to make sure
mm,
that that doesn't happen again to
yeah,
my generation. I don't want that happening to young black people, whether it's in America, whether it's here, whether it's in whatever
mhm,
country. I don't want that ever happening. And I don't want that happening for the next generation. So it's important to
mm,
be as proactive as we can now. And I'm so glad to see so many people doing that in the wake of what happened to George Floyd.
mm. And I think you bring up such a pivotal point, in the fact that, this is definitely a time where I think now, even though there've always been, and for people, they're like, oh, why are people, adding unnecessary drama? Why the hoopla?
Yeah.
If you were there, or if you, are experiencing it yourself, you would never know. You would never, understand, I think, the severity of what has been continuously happening for so many years. And it's interesting that you talk about the fact that, you mentioned earlier that even though I'm not an African American, as a black man, to see the atrocities, not only back in the
Yeah.
US, but here at home. How do you feel as someone who's endured, I think, not only being a black man, but obviously you have a dual heritage and growing up in the UK, because you were born and bred in Northampton, right?
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I am like, so I'm half, so I'm Jamaican and Indian. I come from, a mixed race household,
Mm,
and sort of it takes a while to sort of realize the racism that you have endured, because
mm,
I think what this country do and what a lot of Western countries do is they kind of downplay it. They really, really want to downplay it. And when it comes to the microaggressions, when you think back in life, like how many white people or white friends said the N-word around you,
yeah.
how many white friends or white people tell you, you're one of the good ones, and that's supposed to make you feel special. I've had friend groups tell me that, like, Harjit, like, I don't really like, I don't really like, know that many black people or friends with that many black people, but you're great. You're one of the good ones. And I know, and you think back, I'm like, oh yeah, I know why I'm one of the good ones is because I don't talk about race and I don't talk about systematic racism and I don't brother
Mm,
like bringing that up, and so it doesn't make your white ego feel guilty or challenged
yeah.
for never bringing that up. So because I'm serviceable to you and your fantasies and your delusions of what you think race
Mm,
is and
yeah.
so on, I'm one of the good ones. And it's like, it's just so absurd, and it's really, really upsetting because, as a person, I like to describe myself as an optimist and like an idealist, and I like to see the
Mm,
best of a situation, and I like to see the best in the world and the best in people. But
mm,
when you have realized you've been growing up and people have been judging you on the color of your skin or treating you differently based on that, it can just feel really, really like daunting,
mm,
and really, really upsetting. And you never really realize just how severely it affects
yeah.
you or how severely it's affected you in the past.
Mm,
Um, like when the whole George Floyd thing was happening, I was doing like as much as I can, tweeting it, talking to friends about it, sharing it on Twitter and stuff. Even when my own mental health, seeing that was just so upsetting for me.
mm,
And during around that time when it was really peaking, unfortunately, it was also I barely even remembered that this was coming up, but it was also the remembrance of the Sikh genocide. Now, I'm not Sikh myself, but my father is Sikh. He comes from a very Sikh family. All his siblings are Sikh, all my cousins are Sikh and such. They've had Sikh weddings and so on. And though I don't personally know like my father's experience growing up in India at the time,
mm,
or his parents or so on, but they would have lived in India during the Sikh genocide. And I could just only imagine the pain and fear that would have had, even
mm,
if, you aren't directly at risk, even if you aren't in the city that's most affected. The fact
mm,
that there's so many people willing to do that to you based on your religion, and
mm,
I'm going through this during the murder of George Floyd, and I'm having to like tweet all these different things like remember the Sikh genocide, do not forget 1984,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
also support Black Lives Matter. And it was just like, God, the amount of suffering that people of color, especially Black people, but just people of color generally go
Mm,
through is horrific. And though it hurts to kind of have to recognize that and recognize the racism and discrimination I've endured, it's also freeing because now you get to see the world in a more sort of truthful light. And I
mm,
think by allowing yourself to be educated, that's also good because then you get to use that knowledge to educate a lot
yeah.
of other people. And the more you ignore it, the more you pretend that the color of your skin doesn't matter in this world, when systematic racism is so just pervaded everything, the worse it gets, I feel. So I'm glad to have acknowledged that and acknowledged what I've experienced, even if it hurts. And I'm hoping that I can use my experience to like educate other people as well.
But I also wanted to speak about in terms of your work and how, writing has I think shaped also your ideas. Where did your love of writing start, especially in light of all of this, and being a black author, how does that encompass with all the beliefs that you've had and how strong your views are, especially with how outspoken that you've been? How has your writing been, therapeutic for you, and how has it always been before? And how do you hope that it will serve a purpose in the future?
So writing to me has always been a sort of enjoyment. it's definitely changed, and I think my writing at least has evolved with me, because when you create art, it's a reflection of yourself. um I started writing when I was just 7, and I did it because this book that I loved had like ended, and I was like, I don't want it to end, so I just wrote a sequel. And after that, literally, that's literally what I did.
Oh,
My
you.
first my first work, fan fiction. Love that for me at 7 years old. Um, Straight up. And then after realizing that, like, oh yeah, I can just I can just make stories that I love reading so much. I've just been progressively writing and writing, and it's been difficult. It's been so hard, and it still is. And I think it's even harder now to be a Black author. I think one thing that doesn't really get said enough about writing, or maybe just different types of art in general, is just how lonely it can be. Like, you have to spend, it is not a codependent venture. You have to spend hours and hours and hours, or at least for me, plotting, researching, writing, putting something together. It can be a short story, it could be a novella, it could be whatever form you want to write in.
Mm,
And then I think recently, how I said about like how I've realized a lot of harsh truths about the world as an
mm,
adult, I've kind of realized that through my writing. Writing is very therapeutic. It is. But at the same time, you want to, or at least I want to be good at it. I want to be great at it. And that requires a lot of seeing it less as an enjoyment and something more as a profession. And
mm,
when you turn something that you love into like work, it is just that. It's work. You have to spend a lot of time doing research and a lot of time practicing at it.
mm,
And the biggest revelation to me when it concerns my writing isn't how important the writing is and how important it is that the writing is good. It is how important it is to get the writing heard.
mm,
So I made my debut with Semi-Auto Magic just last year, like when I was just 20 years old, which is pretty young for like an author to like push a book out. And I have a lot of lessons I've learned from Semi-Auto Magic. Ultimately, I will always still love it because it was like my first piece of work out there. Even if I'll criticize it and even if there are regrets I have about it, I'll always still love it as a project. Um, However, you have to learn, especially as a Black author, how difficult it is in the publishing industry.
mm,
Like, I'm an indie author, so that basically means I just mostly like self-publish, or I have just self-published. I've never traditionally published, at least not yet. And that means I have to do everything myself, pretty much. I have to do the writing, the formatting, making the covers, getting editors, networking, the marketing. Every single thing I have to basically do myself. If
mm,
not, I'll have to pay people for.
mm.
And a lot of indie authors, especially a lot of Black indie authors, don't have the funds for that.
Yes. Yeah.
They do not have the funds for that. And traditional publishing, it's even scarier being a Black author. You will have people that will look down on you or judge you. And I've not been in those circles, but I've done a lot of research for traditional publishing, and it's surprising how many people are willing to say there's a lot of racism, discrimination behind the scenes there that you have to be very careful of. And they've given it to me as advice. They've given it as just general advice to POC and Black authors, and I'm very thankful for that. But at the end of the day, writing is very therapeutic for me. I'm always going to love it, but it is also very hard work, and I appreciate it. And I just hope to just continue getting better at it and just produce
Mm,
some really great stories that can commentate on human emotion, representation, social inequality, mental health, especially, and so on. And if people like my stories and if people get something out of it, I think that honestly means a lot to me. That I
mm,
could write something so moving that someone would be so deeply affected by it.
mm.
That I think that would be the best thing for me to come out of my writing.
Yeah. And It's interesting that you say that and you bring up the fact that you're currently a young indie author. I wanted to know whether there's a lack of visibility for young Black, indie authors like yourself, and how is it in comparison to whether if you entered the writing industry in a traditional sense? Because I'm sure you saw the viral hashtag that was going on. I don't know if you saw, all these big Black authors like Roxane
Mhm.
Gay talk about how much she was paid by her publishing company,
Yes.
and the
Yeah.
viral hashtag, hashtag publishing paid me.
Hmm.
And the stories were horrific, considering that a lot of the Black authors, even though it was started by two young adult authors like McKinley, who was like, no, is something wrong with the fact
Yeah.
that hypocrisy with publishing companies saying, obviously in light of, Black Lives Matter, saying, oh, we're in solidarity. But the reality is, with so many testimonies being put on Twitter, as you must have seen, like, it was not shocking, but shocking, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. So
No.
where do you stand with really seeing such, I think, comparison, to that, and then with your experiences with a black, indie author. So
Mhm.
where do you stand with all of it, and how do you feel like you possibly could be an advantage, but is it still hard if you're a person of color in the industry in general, even if you're indie or not?
Yes, definitely. I would definitely say so. So I've been very like very carefully sort of keeping track of like publishing paid me and such. And some of the pay discrepancies are horrific.
Mm,
So I don't know if you know this, but there is Jesmyn Ward. She is a Black woman, and
yeah,
her
yeah.
second book, Salvage the Bones, won the National Book Award for Fiction, which is insane for your career to have your second book win the National Book Award for Fiction. And she wrote and publishing paid me. And she said that her third book, the one came right after that, her and her agent had to fight to secure a 100K advance. The publisher didn't just offer that right off the bat, despite the fact that she won that prestigious award, despite the fact that her second book was doing so well, didn't didn't offer that her off the bat. She's described that her and her agent had to fight tooth and nail just to get that much money, which is absurd to me. When you have there was like a really noteworthy one where this one author called Chip Cheek, for his novel Cape Town, I believe it's called, he got an 800K advance, and that's his debut novel. And that is crazy for even like the average white author. Like, getting that much off a debut is crazy. But what
Yeah.
was even it was so odd, and what was even just weirder was, I know, obviously, no offense to Chip Cheek, I appreciate that they have come out and they've been very transparent about this, because they've opened up this conversation about pay discrepancies for Black authors and then for white authors. Um,
Mm,
I've never heard of that author. I've never heard of Cape Town personally, and I just thought, okay, well, that's just, I'm one person. Like, my experience is not the universal experience. But then a lot of people and a lot of authors started talking on Twitter how they too had never heard of this author. They have never heard of Cape Town. I looked at Cape Town. I'm not sure if it ever went to bestseller. Um, and I'm not entirely sure still how it secured such a huge advance. But even that author, Chip Cheeky, he said, like, to see other writers that I look up to, like Jesmyn Ward, get that much for her books is crazy to me. It's so disheartening sometimes being like Black in this industry. Like, I remember sort of sitting down, and I'm currently on a master's course for creative writing in De Montfort University. Um, I'm just sitting down, and one class, I just kind of looked around, still getting to know everyone, and I just kind of realized I'm the only Black person here. And for that to be like, I'm in Leicester. I'm in one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse city in England. And, obviously, like, I'm not saying that there aren't probably tons of other Black people on different courses and such. I'm just in one university. This is just my experience. But it just felt so lonely to like just kind of be sitting there and just realize I'm the only black person here. Like everyone else is white. What does that mean exactly if we were all to become like authors, especially successful authors? Like, am I gonna be? Do I have the mantle of having to encourage other black people if they want to come in? Why aren't there that many black people here? And it just got me thinking, and yeah, it just feels so lonely. And I think that's what the industry, especially like the publishing industry, can do to you. I remember another story on Publishing paid me was for The Hate You Give, which is by Angie
Yes,
Thomas.
yes, yeah. I'm so
Absolutely sort of like amazing book. It's a bestseller. It's still a bestseller right now.
Mhm.
Had a great movie come out, everything. It was about police brutality. And one person who I believe used to be an editor and they worked in an agency, they said that their agency did not try to auction for The Hate You Give at the time, despite the fact that every agent loved it, despite the fact they were getting calls in saying like, "Oh my God, congratulations, you can auction for it," yada yada yada. Everyone seemed to love it, and the reason why is because they claim that one executive said black people don't read. That's why they did not auction for it. Black people don't read, and that the young adult genre is mostly for white girls. It's going to be mostly white girls, and they don't want to read about a black female protagonist. And they did not auction for it based on that. And it is like so disheartening, especially for me to like enter an industry and I'm already like like it's hard. It's going to be hard. It's always going to be a struggle. Especially if you're indie or traditional or whatever, because this is just a very competitive industry, and you have to be independent, and you really have to try your best to be good. But like to have on top of that, just knowing that there are going to be plenty of publishers and plenty of agents who will look down on you
Yeah.
because they might think, well, this writing's good, this book is good, but the color of your skin is not marketable enough, is so disheartening and sad for the stories. A lot of stories that you could tell about many people of color protagonists, many based on many like different cultures and, just the love and craft that so many black people could bring to writing and do bring to writing. And a lot of that can just get denied, not because of a genuine concern for the quality of writing or if this story is the right one to tell to people or to promote and publish, but just the simple reason that black people don't read. That's that's just incredibly disheartening. And I really, really do hope that Publishing Paid Me changes things. At the very least, I definitely think it's woken up a lot of people, especially a lot of white authors, have woken up to the discrepancies between their pay and
Yes.
other black people's pay. And I really hope in the future that fuels up a generation of writers who, if they decide to be editors, they decide to be publishers, they take another look at people's work and not the color of their skin.
Yeah. 100%. I definitely agree with you. And I think, right now, and I'm so glad that this happened because even though
Hmm.
us as people of color, not even just people of color, but us as black people, we've
Yeah.
always been aware of the racial disparities that happen within every sector. And the problem is that it's a continual denial. This is the problem,
Yeah.
it's a continual denial. And the fact that it's not only the fact that black authors don't have that that space, but we
Hmm.
don't have enough editors, like you said, we don't have enough black run publishing companies.
Yeah.
And how do you come as a black indie author going to this industry? How do you feel in terms of that fear, like you said, that where's a safe space for someone like me and the stories that I want to create and the stories that I have created? It must be so daunting regardless, even though there is a slow regression. But do you think,
Yeah.
where do you stand on all of it as a black indie author yourself?
Um, yeah, like you said, it is just completely daunting. Like, not only do I have to like, be like, I have to practice, I have to make sure that my work is good, I have to market myself, I have to build a brand, I have to do everything that I can there's just that like fear that like no matter how hard you work, color of your skin, it just it's going to like severely impact your already low chances. Like everybody that's or most people that are coming into this industry, you know, like they are people that already have low chances of success because it is a competitive industry, it's a difficult industry. But then to be a black person and to have the color of your skin just make those low chances even lower, it's quite like distressing. And you know, I'm trying my best to just be as positive as I can, to work as hard on my writing as I can. I'm very, very open to like criticism. I always ask my friends or like beta readers or editors, like, hey, what is like, you know, what are long-term things also that you think I should work on
Yeah,
as well? Not just what's wrong with the story. Like you've read other stories from me. What
yeah,
else do you want me to do?
yeah.
And I don't know, like I'm trying to be positive, but there's just this fear that like, hey, no matter how hard you work on your writing, it's never going to be enough because you're black, which is unfortunately seems to be quite a sad reality in the publishing industry.
Mhm.
But you know, once again, there have thankfully been plenty of successful black authors and black writers, even in the 20th century. And even though they're not as celebrated as much as their white counterparts,
Mm.
hopefully in the future, you know, I do think we are seeing like a great first for, you know, stories from people of color, stories from black people, stories about black people,
Mm.
especially that representation. And I'm so glad that I was born in this generation for that, because it would, you know, if it's disheartening now just to see on Twitter the fact that someone said, I don't want to, like, you know, give this bestseller, this amazing bestseller that's loved in the publishing industry, a chance because black people don't read. I can't even imagine what it was like for, you know, like Octavia Butler or Toni Morrison back in their day to get traditionally published. I can't even imagine. And yet they still prevailed and they were still
Yeah.
successful. And those kind of authors are the ones that inspire me now in the wake of this, when I feel like this is tough. I don't know if I'm going to do it. You know, I'm trying my best. I'm just thinking other people in worse positions were much more successful
Mm.
than you. You
Mm.
could hopefully live up to that one day. You could hopefully get your writing good enough to live up to that one day. And you just have to continue writing. And I give that same advice to other black people who want to get into not even just writing, but any artistic profession, whether it's music, whether it's literal art, whether it's even graphic
Mm.
design or something, you know, just keep at it, because the world is currently changing right now and there is a space for you. There's always going to be a space for black creators.
Yeah, you're definitely right. And I think with now being born at this time, it's that that drive and that push, for us to be like, we're not gonna be put in the back anymore. This
Yeah,
is not okay. This is not okay. And we've seen what, so many, inspiring and prolific and historically important, black writers and artists, in general, and
yeah,
how they paved the way for us now to be able to have this conversation. As much as we're not saying it's the best, we're not saying that, oh my God, we should be soaking into as much success as possible, but it's now
yeah,
able to know that, as much as things aren't the best, it is better and it can get even more better in the future. And I wanted to know, with your own personal experiences of being a black indie writer, how has it been, especially, with creating your own stories, like you said, when you published semi-automatic last year at the age of 20? What was that like? Finally going into the industry as like a writer, and what were your experiences like, and had you found, I think, community of black indie writers that you felt, I think solidarity, and I think
mm,
acknowledgement that, we're like, you how can I say this, that, that I think there's a possibility, there's a space for you, especially, and I
yeah.
think genre as well. Tell me a little bit about what you've been through and how it's been, since you've started doing this writing thing.
It has been absolutely crazy. after publishing Semi-Auto Magic, I've like ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to like put out a book. And it felt so crazy to me that I've put out a book at just 20 years old, like that I've already achieved like one of my life dreams at such a young age, especially in comparison to the industry. Like a lot of people do not publish like when they're very, very young. Um, and I have like a lot of love for that. I have some regrets about that and the way it went about. And I've had to do so much research by myself concerning where do I go now? What is publishing like? How do I do future projects? And ever since I've set up myself on social media with like an official account. I've set up my own website, which I pay like monthly for, and I host like a blog on it and I host short stories on it. I've started entering like I've recently entered like a short story competition. I've started trying to like network and get advice from a lot of different people on social media. And even like things like like earlier today I was writing, and then like today I was like, oh, I've got to get ready for like this interview, which I'm was so thankful for. Like it's really really great to like have to work away at something that I love, even if at times it can be very stressful. Working on Semi-Auto Magic was one of the most stressful periods of my life because I was working on that. I had assignments to do at university. I was working retail at the time as well. And it was my first job. So like, kind of sucked at it, but like I was working as hard as I could on that to like impress my managers or whatever. And it was literally commonly days where I would go into the library, probably around like maybe anywhere from like 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and be there till midnight, just like working and working and writing away and planning on it. And it doesn't look like much, obviously. Like it's a 55-page book. It's like 5 short stories and so on, and they're quite short each one. But I had to learn how to format. I had to learn how to make a book cover by myself. Like I had to like somehow get someone to help me edit it. I had to get people to like beta read it, like all by myself with no experience. The only experience I ever had and I ever focused on was just writing and trying to learn the like grasp of narrative and pacing and characterization and so on. But actually making a book is so, so difficult, especially when you're just on your own. You don't really have the money to like get it printed like other kids in your class or whatever. And I had to even get the assignment like extended because I was just working like on that. And then I was also working like with you in our journalism class, like a magazine,
Yeah.
like 100+ page magazine with like graphic designs and also like it was crazy. But I'm so thankful I did that. And I'm very, very thankful for everyone who's come out and supported me and so on. And everyone who's just like sort of been like, I picked up a copy of the book. Like, you're an author. Like, you should be proud of that. Like, I'm so, so thankful to like all my friends who have done that. And ever since then, I kind of realized just like, okay, I knew writing a book was hard. Now I know how hard. Like I have an idea now, like a litmus test of like the effort that you have to put into a book. And so I'm very cautious with how I approach new projects, how I advertise them, what I do, especially after coronavirus. I was working on 2 books and I told myself entering into my MA, you're gonna have to work your ass off. Like you are gonna have to like I was planning like I was going to events, I was going to like readings, I was trying to network as much as I could. I was even willing to like straight up like start printing posters and ask them if I could hang them around like campus or other places and like be the whole marketing team for my work, a marketing team of 1. And then unfortunately coronavirus took place and I had to indefinitely delay those projects. So, it's been really, really difficult, especially just this year, everything that's happened. I don't think anyone's had an easy year. Um, but yeah, as difficult as it is, I still love writing. I still want to tell stories. And I think as a Black person, you know, I'm not only very thankful just at the opportunity that I have now that I know many Black people in the past didn't have, or Indian people in the past didn't have. They wouldn't be able to go to university and study writing.
Mm.
And, I'm so thankful my parents have supported me in that. I'm so thankful the rest of my family have. I'm so thankful that I have people like you and other friends who support me in that. And as difficult as it might be,
Uh,
you know, as difficult as the industry is, you just have to keep going. It will look intense, it will look intimidating, but you can do it. You just try and break it down into pieces for what you want to learn, how you're going to learn it, and how you're going to take a step forward. You
mm.
don't have to do everything at once, but as long as you're making some progress, you're doing a good job. And I just wish everybody luck in that, to me and every other Black creator and every other author out there.
And how have you utilized your own personal experiences with coping with mental health, and the fact that you have opened up about suffering from depression?
Mhm.
How have you made sure, especially when writing your upcoming book? I don't know how much more you can go into detail, which is so
Mhm.
exciting, but how have you been able to really tell like a multi-dimensional story? Because like you said, especially being a Black writer, and I'm sure narratives and representation is so important to you,
Yes.
not only professionally but personally. How have you been able to really ensure that is put in place, not only with your previous work but even with your upcoming work? how
Mhm.
like how have you been able to do that and really tell the story with so much truth and honesty, which, like you said, it is difficult, it must be so difficult for you.
It just takes a lot of a lot of self-examination. I think a lot of people who are creative tend to be people who are very insular. They're able to sort of like be introspective and look
Mm,
into themselves. And that can be both a positive and a negative. Positive in that it can really help you understand your feelings. It can really help you communicate, which is,
mm,
more and more important for all kinds of relationships and just your own mental well-being, to be able to communicate your feelings very clearly and concisely and understand them. But the negative is when you suffer from a mental illness such as depression and your mind can be messed up from it, sometimes it's hard to tell what your true feelings are, what
mm,
what feelings are valid and what are not. And you can feel as if you hate yourself, but I wouldn't want to say
mm,
I wouldn't want to ever tell someone that self-loathing is valid to them, when they suffer from a mental illness. But it is something they truly do feel. So it's hard to sort of like take that away from them when they're introspective and putting that into their art.
mm,
And I think recently, especially with like the next book, it's just been so important for me to just kind of like sit down, self-analyze, and use my own experiences.
mm,
Um, because I truly believe if you're going to write about mental illness or race or gender or sexual orientation or anything, that perhaps you haven't experienced, um, it is very important that you research. And if you have experienced it, you don't have to, but you can use your own experiences to push to like pen that down to like how the protagonist feels, what the protagonist is going through, to really
mhm,
describe and ultimately let the reader know, how does this feel like? How does depression feel like? What is it like? You know? And that's what I've done with this book. As well as this, the protagonist also suffers from anxiety as well. That's a major key theme. And as far as I know, I do not suffer from anxiety. So even someone like me who has a mental illness, I've been very careful and considerate, and I've been talking to friends. I have friends who have anxiety, unfortunately. I have researched about anxiety symptoms,
mm,
how it's like to write a character with anxiety and such. How is it like to write a panic attack, for example?
mm,
Um, and it's just important that people, educate yourself about things like that. And it's important that even I, someone who suffers from a mental illness,
mm,
educate myself about that, because mental illness is such a deep and sort of nuanced and difficult subject to tackle. But,
mm,
I think, being able to tackle it is a good thing to begin with. And it's something that I'm very fortunate that I'm in a position to be able to do with my work, because I'm a writer. And I hope that other people who unfortunately suffer from mental illness, if they're in a creative field, they feel, safe enough to be able to. So I can say it's something that I previously announced, but I'm still working on it, and I've been reworking on it because it's been delayed due to coronavirus. So my next book will be a psychological thriller called Bloom. It explores a 23-year-old journalist known as Ethan Ruff, who is living his life with his boyfriend in New York City. He's just graduated, he started his job, he's got his boyfriend that he's met in college. Life seems to be as perfect as it could be. Unfortunately for Ethan, he suffers from both severe depression and anxiety, which causes life to sort of crash and burn in New York City. With the help of some family, and he manages to find a very good deal, almost too good to be true deal, for a new home in a town across the country, a small southern town in South Carolina called Fairhope, which he moves into this new house. He begins to meet his neighbors and such, but things start to unravel once again, and Ethan has to wonder if it's his own anxious mind and his mental illness that is sort of playing at him once again and causing him to suffer, or if there is some truth to it and there's something odd going on in this town. And so it's a psychological thriller, and I've been working really, really hard on it. It's also currently sort of like my dissertation. So I'm just writing at it every day, doing as much as I can, and I hope to release it next year.
Oh my God, that is so exciting. And
Thank you.
I cannot wait. I'm actually so excited to read it. You guys, please, please, please make sure you check out Harjit. So where can people find you? So what are your socials?
So for Instagram, it is just at HKS Author. For Twitter as well, it's the same. It's at HKS Author as well. And as well as this, you can go to my website, which I try to update regularly on my blog and with short stories. That is hksing.squarespace.com. So you can find me at any of those. I'm usually like tweeting or something, or like networking as much as I can, or posting on my blog. And if you want to read my short stories, they'll be available for free on my website as well.
Perfect. That is amazing. Thank you so much. Guys, make sure you check out Harjit's blog. He posts short stories. He has a lot of amazing gems on there. And also, you can still purchase Semi-Auto Magic on Amazon. So, y'all, you support our Black King, please do, because
Thank you so much.
And I think what's so amazing is that I think what I've noticed that you love to play with different genres. You're not afraid, because Semi-Auto Magic you described it as an urban fantasy short story book, and then now for you to do a psychological thriller is just your mind.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So the charity that I'd like to support is the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. It's basically sort of a charity. As I was doing research on, I wanted one that was a lot more, as important as it is to always be on Twitter. I'm reblogging a lot of like Black Lives Matter charities and stuff that you can donate to, and petitions and such, and Black businesses to support. I really believe that long-term change is the solution here, and this fund is credited by the NAACP. As far as I can tell, it's got great credentials. They've done amazing work, and they said specifically on their website they are fighting against systematic racism. And obviously, systematic racism is what brought us here today. Systemic racism is what has pervaded, law, justice, order, the government, the police department, everything, especially in America. So I truly believe that donating to an organization that is dedicated to changing government and, says that it is rooting out systemic racism is really, really important to me. So I would love it. Even if you don't have the money to donate, please, go on their website, share it on Twitter, keep giving them support, because someone might have the money to donate that you've shared to. And I think they're really, really important right now, because if we are ever to prevent, anything like George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, or going back to like Sandra Bland or Trayvon Martin again, need to support people that are willing to go to their government and say, this isn't right. You need to change this right now. You need to change the entire system. So please, 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 if you can, like, do donate to them. Anything like would be helpful, especially right now with the protest still going on. And if you can't donate, at least check out the website and share it. It would be really appreciated.